When I introduce myself overseas, some people are surprised that I have an English name, and sometimes they even ask if my English name is my real name. Hi, this is Cloris. How are you doing? I'm from Hong Kong and I've been living in Germany for more than 7 years. Today, I'm gonna answer one question that some people are curious about. Why do so many Hongkongers have English names? Besides, I would also talk about a very funny phenomenon in Germany, Kevinismus, and why people would address me as Mrs. Lau assuming that I'm married, and how all these gave me an interesting perspective to perceive name and identity. So first of all, let's dive into why having an English name is such a common thing for us in Hong Kong. We can trace back to our colonial roots. Hong Kong was a British colony for more than 150 years, from 1842 to 1997. Since then, English has not been just an official language, it's been also a language for government, education, law, and business. I can only share my personal experience till the recent years because I'm not sure about the future anymore. I haven't been living there for quite some years and I'm not sure if I'll be moving back in the future. So back to the key point. For locals, we use English name to interact with British officials, teachers, and international business. And this traditional practice just stayed with us even after the handover in 1997. Therefore, in Hong Kong, English name is almost a culture norm. It's very common for someone to introduce themselves as Peter, John, Emily, Olivia, or Kelvin, which is a very special name that I will talk about later for its specific hidden meaning in Germany. Therefore, in some formal occasions, it's very common to see both English name and Cantonese name existing side by side. For example, in a university lecture or employee name list in the companies, both English name and Cantonese name are equally important to our identity. For example, someone's name can be written as Chan Tai Man Peter. Chan is the family name that we usually put first. Usually, our Cantonese first name would be put in the second position, and then lastly, we would put our English name. However, for my case, in my school, we followed more the British practice. For example, for my name, they would put it as Cloris Lau. So Cloris is my first English name, and then Lau is my family name. And they would put it this way in all the documents. That's why we always see our name as a real name. You really use it on a daily basis. I think it's a very special practice that not a lot of people can understand. Culturally, however, for Mainland China, English names is obviously not a tradition. People usually just pick one when they started learning English in schools or later on when they needed that for work. But in daily life, they usually just stick to their Mandarin Chinese names. Besides that, Taiwan also doesn't have British colonial history, but English is still a core school subject. English name is more common in younger generations and in international workplaces, but just less automatic than that in Hong Kong. Then second, followed by our colonial roots, education system also plays an important role here. We usually start our official English classes in nursery or kindergarten at the age around 2 to 3. For some families, if their parents speak English, they would also start talking English to kids much earlier. Many schools in Hong Kong, especially the English medium ones, encourage or even require students to choose an English name. For example, my cousin is like 20 years younger than me and he started nursery very early at the age of 2. Since then, he has been using the same English name till now and probably in the future as well. Also, that English name is put in all his official documents, his passport, ID cards, etc. One funny thing is that when we were in primary school, at the very beginning, our teacher would choose English names for us if we didn't have one given by our parents. However, some students got to choose their own English name later on. I've been using my name Cloris since I went to secondary school because almost all the subjects are taught in English, except Chinese class, Chinese history class, and Mandarin class. Back then, we still learned Chinese in Cantonese instead of Mandarin, so we just have like one Mandarin class every week. And basically, I didn't learn my Mandarin in those classes. I learned my Mandarin from Taiwanese TV drama and TV shows, and my school was also a Catholic school, and we pray in English in the morning assembly and after lunch. All the school magazines, documents, announcements, emails are also in English. It was very hard for me to catch up at the very beginning. I stayed up pretty late to finish all my homework because it was so hard. The worst part was math and science because they were also taught in English, and I remember there was also one math teacher from India and an English drama teacher from the UK. Like when I'm abroad, Some people gave me compliment, hey, your English is good. Of course, I felt happy and I appreciated their compliments, but at the same time, I also felt a little bit weird because I've been learning English since I was 3 years old, and almost all subjects were taught in English when I was in secondary school and university. So back to my story, I've been using the name Cloris since I was in secondary school, and then I've been using that to uni and at work in Hong Kong. By the way, I did not make this name up. A lot of people have never heard this name, but I did pick it up from an online dictionary or Wikipedia or somewhere. I did check my name's origins and meaning. It was from Greek mythology. Cloris was a minor nymph who was associated with spring, flowers, and new growth. So I thought it was really cool and unique, and I liked the meaning as well. It seems really refreshing, green, nature. There were also a lot of repetitive names in the school, so I was thinking, I should pick a more unique name so no one would have the same name as me. But back then, unfortunately, when I was 12 years old, I didn't think about the pronunciation could lead some people to think of a female organ, which I had realized so much later. But then one day I met an American at work, and he told me that there was an American actress called Cloris Leachman, and she's a very nice woman, but she passed away some years ago. So yeah, this name is kind of rare. By the way, since I've become a naturalized German, I also have a German first name. It's like I have different identity in different places. But when I was choosing my German name, I was extremely careful because I just want a normal name. For example, in Germany, there are also a lot of popular names like Max, Philip, Julia, Katharina. Even though there are a lot of people sharing the same name, I just want to be a normal person. I didn't want to stand out, and I also want people to just know immediately how to pronounce that name, so to avoid a lot of troubles. But in the past few years, after I came to Germany, before I completed my naturalization and officially add my German name into my documents, I've been using my Cantonese name at uni and at work, but I felt very weird because they just call part of my first name instead of my full first name. But I will tell you why from the linguistics perspective later on. And at the university, I also learned Spanish and French. Back then, my Spanish teacher told us that we could use a Spanish name, but I just didn't want to cause too much confusion, so I didn't pick a Spanish name. Otherwise, I could have like so many names, and I think that's very mind-blowing. Speaking of linguistics and languages, we also use English name because of the practicality in international context. To be honest, Cantonese names always contain sounds that are very hard for foreigners to pronounce and remember. Having an English name makes it easier for us to interact with international business, travels, and studies abroad. Cantonese can be so hard for foreigners to pronounce because it's a completely different language system compared to, for example, Germanic, Latin, or Slavic, etc. For each word, we have 6 to 9 tones, and each tone has different meanings. Even though you're pronouncing one syllable with one tone, that could also refer to different characters. For example, yan and yan. I bet a lot of people couldn't distinguish the differences between these two words. Also, yan in Tongwan can be written as yan, yan, and yan, and etc. Even as a native speaker, when we ask somebody for their names, we need to even ask, so how do you write Yan? This is also a very common Cantonese first name. So for example, Ga Yan is a very common Cantonese name. And then when this girl Ga Yan is telling her name to other people would ask, which Ga and which Yan? Because with the same pronunciation, these two pronunciations could refer to different characters and different combination of characters. Meanwhile, while Yan in tone 4 is written as this, having an English name would make the introduction more smooth and easy for us, especially in business or travel abroad. And from my experience, I did work for a few companies before I moved to Germany. All the official documents, internal emails, and external emails are also in English. Our anglicized Cantonese names are actually not for daily use, but it's just for the documents. Speaking of culture, it is also more polite to call someone's English name instead of their Cantonese name because it sounds a bit more rude to call someone's full Cantonese name. So when would we be called by our full Cantonese name? First of all, we come to a government appointment or something, you will hear that. Or when your mom is very angry, then she would shout your full name, which is not a good sign at all. That sounds like a more international practice for moms. It's actually kind of like a dilemma because I don't even remember when people people would use my anglicized Cantonese name, but I'm only using that abroad when I'm in Germany because this name is actually in my document, so I got to use it. My friends and I also have some funny stories. For example, one friend is called Yi. Also, I made up this name, and she lives in a very small German village. So basically, the same postman would come to deliver post every day, and she got to know the postman a little bit better. One day, while she was going to pick up the letter, the postman just shouted her name out loud. Instead of calling her last name, he called the first part of her first name. He was calling yok, 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 and very loudly. My friend was a little bit annoyed. It's yok, it's not yok. Even though there is a K at the end, we don't pronounce that K at all. Apart from that, if he were to call her first name, he should have called Yok Yi instead of just Yok or Yok. Besides pronunciation, the order of our name can also cause other problems. For example, a lot of people couldn't distinguish our family name and our first name, and 99.9% people couldn't tell our gender from our names. Therefore, here at work, a lot of clients who have never met me would address me as Mr. Lau or just Lau. They assume that my name is Laura or something, but it just sounds very weird for me. But I also didn't want to put like she, her in my signature, so I'll just let them call me Mr. Lau until they have a video call with me or they meet me in person. They would be in shock. While our names can cause a lot of confusions to foreigners, the same incident can happen another way around. For practicality, many British governors also have Cantonese names. While we are watching news from TV, all the foreign politicians have Cantonese names as well. For example, Trump has one, Trudeau has one, Macron has one, and Merkel has one too. Some translated names like this are very poetic as well, and there's a funny story happened to a friend of mine. He is Italian. His name is Daniele. He went to Taiwan to study Chinese many years ago, so the university in Taiwan got all the students' names, and the university staff would give each student a Mandarin Chinese name, but then they thought Daniele sounds like a girl, so they gave him a Mandarin Chinese female name. And he's still using that name till now. And then I want to talk about cultural blending and identity. As English name become a cultural norm, a lot of parents give their children English name alongside their Cantonese name. Sometimes people choose their English names later in life. Some parents choose their children's English name earlier than their Cantonese names because they need to consult fortune tellers. In order to get Chinese names from fortune tellers, they need to know the exact date and time of birth of their children. Therefore, they can only consider it when their children are born. Also at home, parents can name their son and daughter as Gaming and Gayan. Gaming is a male name and Gayan is a female name usually. So we can kind of tell that they are siblings. However, a lot of foreigners didn't know that two characters are actually belong to the first name, and they would call only part of it like Ga. So if there is a situation that people call both of them, people only call the first part of their first name. Most of the case, they have the same family name, so they both would be called the same. It would be very funny. Therefore, whenever people call the first part of my name without calling my complete first name, I would feel very weird because it sounds like to me my siblings and I all have the same name. Unlike in UK or other Western countries, English names in Hong Kong don't always follow the traditional rules. Some Hongkongers invent funny, unique English names such as Bobo, Dudu, Coffee, or Apple, Cherry. Those are not typical names in English-speaking countries, but that can be seen as a form of self-expression. Now, since I've been living in Germany, I observed that names don't just carry our identity and culture, it also carries social meanings. In Hong Kong, it's so common to have English names, but in Germany, having an English name can be perceived very differently. Recently, I've learned one word which is Kevinismus. Kelvin sounds like a very normal, simple English name, isn't it? But Kevinismus is a social stereotype in Germany. Basically, the idea of certain names, Kevin, Justin, Chantal, Mandy, are linked to lower class or bad behaviors. It started in the 1990s, when English-sounding names became trendy among working-class families. Over time, those names picked up a stigma, so much that German psychologists has actually studied it. teachers were more likely to judge a student named Kelvin as difficult or less intelligent. So yeah, poor Kelvin. These people just got discriminated because their parents picked an English name for them. Does anyone know a Kelvin in your life? So maybe you can comment down below to let me know whether this is true. Does this stigma and phenomenon Kevinismus still exist these days? It's really kind of wild, but it shows that names carry invisible baggage and hidden social meanings. It just got me thinking, it's very funny. In Hong Kong, we use English name because it's more practical, international, and professional at work. But in Germany, some English names like Kelvin can make people think you are less educated. Same idea but different directions. Names reflect what a society values and what is stereotypes. So whether you're Jason Chan from Hong Kong or Kevin Müller from Germany, your name tells people a story, sometimes even before you say a word. And it leads to my another observation that surprised me earlier when I first came to Germany, which is some people would change their family name after marriage. In Germany, it's still very common for married women to take their husband's family name, or the other way around, or they combine both the husband's and wife's family name. Legally, you can choose to keep your own, but most married couples still follow that tradition. However, in Hong Kong these days, it is pretty rare to avoid unnecessary bureaucracies. In general, married women in Hong Kong still keep their family names. For married women, unless they introduce themselves as Mrs. Chan, Mrs. Lee, otherwise people would still just call their English name or their original family name, like Miss Chan, Miss Lee. Even though German bureaucracy sounds very terrifying, a lot of people still would change their family name after they get married. First of all, I don't know about China, but in Hong Kong, we just don't really care these days. We wouldn't spend time to deal with those paperwork. Will we just simply keep our family name? It is also a shock for me to learn that Merkel still keep her ex-husband's family name in her second marriage. And I heard that this is also a very common practice in Germany for some women to keep their ex-husband's family name. In our daily life in Germany, I think there are a lot of cases that we need to use our family name. For example, our doorbells, we also need to put our family name there. If the whole family shares one family name, then it would be easier. People don't have to put two family names on the doorbell. Or when a mother is bringing her children to travel, she doesn't have to prove that these are her children by showing birth certificate if she is not traveling with her husband. But I also wonder if that would be easier for the kids to take both the father and mother's family name, just like the Spanish people do. Besides changing the family name after marriage, another thing that surprised me is that when I first came to Germany and received letters or emails, people would often address me as Mrs. Lau, which is very weird. Back then, I was wondering, do they just assume that I'm married? But it turns out just a translation thing. In English, we usually use Miss like this, which is a neutral title for women regardless of their marital status, while Mrs. is specifically for married women. So I was so shocked when I see all these emails and letters addressing me as Mrs. Lau. Later on, I realized that in German, the word Frau is used for all adult women, regardless of their marital status. It's still a polite and neutral form. By the way, Frau in German can also mean wife. They just use one word for a lot of things. And then when some German translate that into English, they would just automatically translate Frau as Mrs. So now when I see Dear Mrs. Lau, I just got used to it, and I know that they are being polite in a German way. For me, my English name helps me to connect with the world, but my Cantonese name is where my roots are. And currently, I'm using a German name in Germany. It doesn't mean that I don't like my roots or my original culture, or I don't like the name my parents gave me. I don't think there is necessarily a clash between these. Just like when we are speaking different languages, we have kind of like different personas. When I'm speaking Cantonese, I could look like a little bit more shy or with a little bit more euphemism. But when I'm speaking German, I could add like more tough, more direct. When I'm speaking Spanish, I would add like a bit more passionate and cheerful. I think when I'm speaking different languages, I give people different personas. Yeah, you guys can see this English speaking me. Like when I'm speaking Spanish, I would be like, oh, qué rico, en serio, ¿cómo? No pasa nada. Yeah, you just always sound like very curious, very passionate about the other person. It's very interesting to learn that names can carry different labels and different social meanings when it comes to different cultures. There are little time capsules of history, culture, and identity. Anyway, when we are talking about some intercultural practice or experiences, without seeing things in different perspective or historically, culturally, socially, or philosophically, it's hard for people to understand the whole picture. People would take a lot of assumptions. We all grew up in different cultural backgrounds, different countries. Without living there, without gaining more background knowledge, it's really hard to get the full picture, why people do this or that. What we can do is just to keep an open mind and learn from each other without giving an immediate judgment or presumption. I think if you have an international or multicultural background, you would probably understand me more. I'm so grateful that some of you guys also commented below and shared your own experience with me. I truly appreciate that. Do you have an interesting story about your name? Has your name ever made people assume something about you? Please let me know in the comments. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share with your friends or any Kevins you know. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!